Welcome to Quiet Histories for Sleep. Here you will drift through forgotten places, silent rooms, and stories whispered by time itself. Each tale is a gentle journey, designed not to awaken your mind, but to ease it, guiding you softly toward rest. Let the quiet sound of the fire and the slow rhythm of these histories lead you into calm and sleep. Now, close your eyes and let us begin. The pianist in the empty hotel. The arrival. There is a hotel, perched on the edge of a forgotten cliff, where the ocean sighs with a voice older than time. Its windows are blind with dust, its chandeliers hang crooked, its carpets are thick with silence. No guests, no footsteps. Only wind that sometimes knocks like an old friend who has lost the key. The name above the revolving door has faded into gold flakes, peeled away by salt and years. But sometimes on foggy nights, when the moon is thin and the tide swells with memory, a sound drifts out from the grand ballroom, soft, deliberate notes. A piano playing something old and full of longing. No one sees who plays. No lights are on, just the music. Drifting through velvet-draped hallways and staircases that no longer creak. Locals say it's just the wind, or the pipes, or the sea trying to hum itself to sleep. But those who've stood close, those who've dared to walk the overgrown path to the locked front doors on moonless nights, they swear it is real, the music is real, and it waits for someone, or remembers someone, or both. In the village below the cliffs, an old man keeps a journal, faded leather, tied shut with a fraying ribbon. He writes about the pianist, about the nights when the melody changes, growing, slower, more fragile, as if the piano itself was sighing. He once heard it weep, or thought he did. A single note stretched too long, hung in the air like breath. He doesn't go anymore, but he still listens, every night, from his porch, eyes closed, heart tuned to the sound of distant keys. Echoes in the marble long before. It was empty. Before the ivy climbed the balconies and the keys on the front desk turned cold. The hotel was filled with warmth, golden light from lamps in every corridor, laughter drifting from the dining room, perfume and polished shoes, the soft click of heels on marble floors, and music, always music, flowing like warm honey through the halls. The pianist, his name forgotten by time, but once whispered with admiration, played each evening at precisely 7, not for applause, not for recognition, but for love. He sat beneath a stained glass skylight, the twilight painting colors across his suit, his fingers dancing through nocturnes and waltzes, as if the piano were his only language. Some said he had been a traveler, others, a composer who'd lost his fame, but no one doubted his devotion. He played for someone, a woman in a green dress, who always sat at the same table, never speaking, always listening. She drank tea, Earl Grey with a slice of lemon. She never stayed the night, and she always left before the last note. Then one day she stopped coming. No one knew why. There was no farewell, just an empty chair and a pianist who never stopped playing. For weeks, he continued, each night at 7, the same songs, slower now, more fragile, like paper in the rain, until one evening he played a single piece, soft, haunting, and utterly still at the end. Then he rose, closed the lid, and walked into the fog outside. He was never seen again. The room with no number. Years passed. The hotel emptied slowly. One guest left, then another, until only echoes remained to sign the guest book. Rain found its way through the ceiling. Dust settled on silverware. And the chandelier above the piano swayed gently in silence, as if waiting for the music to return. But one room never quite faded. It had no number. Tucked at the end of the west wing, its door slightly ajar, its carpet untouched by dust, its windows never fogged with time. Locals began to speak in hushed tones. They said that sometimes, on certain misty evenings, you could still hear a melody floating through the pines and past the dunes, soft as breath, deep as longing. No one dared enter. Not really, but once, a boy, curious and tired of stories, snuck through the broken fence, tiptoed through the lobby, past shattered vases and peeling wallpaper, and found himself in front of the grand piano. It was untouched, pristine, as if someone had just stood up. A sheet of music rested open. The notes, handwritten, faded but legible. A waltz in a key he couldn't name. Then the boy heard it. Footsteps, deliberate, slow, crossing the ballroom behind him. But when he turned, no one was there. Only a faint warmth in the air, like someone had just left the room, or never had. He ran, he never returned, and yet, sometimes, he dreams of that place. The skylight glowing faintly. The green dress hanging on the back of a chair. The pianist's hands, still moving, still playing for someone who might come back. The final note. There is a theory. Among the older villagers, spoken only after dusk when the wind hushes the trees, they say the pianist never truly left, that he plays not for applause, not for company, but for remembrance, each note a memory, each silence a waiting breath. Some believe he was once in love with a guest who never returned, a woman with quiet laughter, and a notebook full of poems she never showed. She promised to come back when the war was over, when the seas were calm, when the world remembered how to feel again. She never did, but he waited, day after day, song after song. Even when the hotel grew cold, even when the staff left, even when the doors were locked, still, each night, he returned to the keys. Some say he plays only one song now, a piece no one has written, a melody only the waves know. It begins the same, with longing, and ends in silence. One traveller, a woman with silver hair and tired eyes, claimed she stayed near the cliffs to listen. She heard the music. She followed it, but when she reached the hotel, there was nothing but sand and a foundation swallowed by ivy. And yet, in the distance, she saw a light, one window, high in the west wing, warm, flickering as if someone had lit a candle, and was waiting still. The voice beneath the lake. There is a lake, a still, forgotten body of water, deep in the folds of a forest where the trees grow ancient and the moss never dries. Its surface is like glass untouched, untroubled. No birds fly above it, no fish ripple. The waters, it exists, as if waiting for something or someone. Locals speak of the lake in whispers, not out of fear, but out of a reverence one holds for sacred silence. They say the lake listens, but they also say on certain nights, when the moon is high and the wind sleeps behind the hills, you can hear a voice, not a cry, not a song, but story. It doesn't call, it doesn't demand, it simply tells, and no two people hear the same tale. Some have heard the story of a weaver who spun threads from moonlight and stitched the sky. Others of a child who climbed the spine of a mountain to ask the stars a single question. One man, an old watchmaker, swore the lake recited the history of time itself in reverse. No one ever feels afraid when they hear the voice, only still, as if the world forgets to move for a while, as if the breath of time itself slows to listen. The lake has no name, or perhaps it has to. Many to remember. Cartographers omit it from their maps, for it shifts in place, sometimes nestled beneath pines, other times appearing beside stone cliffs. No road leads to it. It must be found, but only by those not seeking it. An herbalist once stumbled upon it, while following the flight of a moth. She swears she smelled lilacs where none grew, and when she reached the edge of the water, the wind stopped, and she heard an old woman's voice recounting the tale of a mirror that never reflected the same thing twice. She listened until dawn, then walked home barefoot, as if the ground had grown too soft for shoes. Others come and find nothing, just water and silence, as if the lake knows when it is being watched. A poet who lived alone for decades left behind a notebook filled with scribbled phrases, her voice like leaves falling in reverse. The stars leaned closer. I forgot my name, but remembered hers. The last page was blank dot, except for a smudge shaped, like a drop of water. Some say the voice is older than the trees, older than the stones, perhaps older than words themselves, that it speaks not in sound, but in memory. One listener claimed to hear her grandmother's lullaby, another, the laughter of a brother lost at sea. A child once wandered near the lake, and returned with a poem she'd never read. When asked where she'd heard it, she only smiled. She told me, there are no ripples when the voice speaks. No wind stirs the reeds. Time hangs like a curtain. The world becomes a pause, and when the story ends, the lake forgets you again. But those who have heard it, they never forget, they return, in dreams, drawn to the hush, to the unseen mouth beneath the surface, to the voice that never asks, only offers. A librarian once tried to write down everything she heard. 7 nights she camped at the lake's edge. Her journal remains, bound in green leather, its pages too brittle to touch. No ink, no letters, just faint impressions, like fingerprints, and when placed under moonlight, the pages glow. Scientists once tried to record the sound. They left microphones on tripods and waited. They captured only silence. But when they played the tape back, one technician heard his mother's voice calling him by a childhood nickname. Another heard the sound of rain falling on a tin roof. On the day his father died, there is no explanation, only stillness, and a voice. And if, one night, you find yourself standing at the edge of a lake you do not recall walking to, if the trees seem to be quiet, if the moon seems to hold its breath, listen, Not with your ears, with your memory you may hear a story you've never known, or a story you've forgotten was yours. Either way, you will never hear silence the same again. The mirror in the ministry vault. There are places within governments that are older than governments themselves, rooms built in silence, vaults constructed not to guard treasures, but to forget them. Somewhere beneath an old ministry building, purpose has changed a dozen times. There is a corridor sealed with layers of stone, key, and bureaucracy. And at the very end of that corridor, in a chamber without light, rested a mirror, not ornate, not gilded, just old, its surface dulled, yet clear enough to reflect. It had no recorded origin, no craftsman's name, no date of acquisition, only a designation in a forgotten ledger. Speculum 42, do not engage. For decades, perhaps centuries, it remained untouched until the year anew. Archivist was appointed. He was young, methodical, curious, the kind of curiosity that tiptoes on the edge of danger. His job was to catalogue the forgotten, to descend into the sub-basements, examine the dust-covered relics, and digitize them for the age of data. That's when he found the door, bolted, sealed, unlabeled, but it called to him, not loudly, not with voices, but with presence. He made inquiries, none knew of it. One elderly clerk frowned and muttered something about the place where reflections lied. But no one stopped him, and so he opened it. Stone scraped against stone, air escaped a breath, held for generations. Inside, the room was bare, except for the mirror. It stood upright, unsupported, facing the doorway, waiting. The archivist approached slowly, flashlight in hand. Dust curled in the beam, and there he saw himself, but not quite, not exactly. His clothes were the same, but the expression, the eyes, were different. The man in the mirror smiled, not a warm smile, not a smile of greeting, a knowing smile, as if they had met before, as if the reflection had been waiting. The archivist felt his heartbeat shift. He blinked the reflection. Didn't he turn? The reflection stood. Still, he backed away. The reflection stepped forward. It wasn't mimicking, it was performing, a version of him that had learned a different path, lived a different life, a shadow self, and then, in a whisper, not of sound but of mind, the archivist understood. This was not a mirror, it was a door. But only one side ever opened. The ministry sealed the room again, this time with more than locks, with silence, with denial. The archivist, he submitted no report. He returned home that evening and found himself already there, living, laughing, with life that wasn't his, but could have been. He didn't knock, he didn't scream, he simply turned around and never returned. Others have tried, since to access the vault, to understand the anomaly. Each one left changed, not visibly, but in quiet. Ways they spoke differently, wrote in new styles, dreamed of cities they'd never seen but somehow missed. Now the mirror lies undisturbed, no longer listed in inventories, no longer part of any floor plan. It doesn't reflect, not truly, it remembers it. Gathers possibilities like dew on glass, versions of lives not lived, choices not made, names that almost were. And if you ever find yourself walking through old ministry corridors and you come upon a door that seems to breathe, do not open it or open it, knowing you may not be the same, and the you that returns may not be you at all. Would you recognize your reflection if it had lived a life completely different from yours? Or would it recognize you first? The light on the distant mountain. There is a mountain that appears on no modern map, and yet on clear days some say they can see it far beyond the familiar peaks, far beyond the roads that end. It rises like a thought half remembered, silent, still, watching. At its summit burns a light, soft, golden, steady. It never flickers, it never dims, it never goes out, not in rain, not in snow, not in the longest shadow of night. And those who have seen it never forget, even if they want to, even if they try. Local stories call it La Cumbre Insondable, the unfathomable summit. Children whisper about it around fireplaces. Elders speak of it only with caution, as if remembering something ancient and sacred, not fearfully, but respectfully, with the kind of reverence given to truths older than language. They say the light marks a pact, a vow made long ago between people and something older than people. One version of the tale says the mountain was once a gathering place, a meeting ground for those who guided the world not with swords, but with silence, with stillness, with understanding. They met there once every 100 years, to renew a promise, to keep the chaos at bay, to remind the earth and its dwellers that balance was not given, it was kept. But then the meeting stopped, not by choice, but by forgetting. Civilizations changed, maps redrawn, stories turned to myths, and the mountain faded from memory, except for the light, that golden flame, still there, still waiting, still shining. Some say the light is tended by no one, that it is the last echo of the pact itself, a promise kept by the mountain. Others say a guardian remains, not human, not fully, a figure cloaked in ash and time, who walks the summit paths in endless circles, chanting words in a language no longer spoken, a liturgy of remembrance, a lullaby for the world. A few have tried to reach it. Explorers, mystics, wanderers, driven by dreams of fire. They follow stars, old journals, crumbled sketches found in attics and archives. They prepare, they climb, and they vanish. No footprints, no traces, only wind, only snow, only silence. One man returned, an old shepherd who had lost his way during a storm. He was found 3 days later, sitting in a field, eyes open, unmoving. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm, quiet. He said, "I saw the light, and I remembered who I was before I was born." Since then, no one else has returned, but sometimes, rarely, someone dreams, a dream of a mountain path, of stones that hum beneath their feet, of a glow through the trees, and a soft voice carried on the wind, saying, "Remember the vow." The light is not a beacon. It does not call, it waits, it observes, it endures. In its glow are stories unspoken, possibilities not yet chosen, regrets that never came to be, and memories that belong to no one, but feel like your own. They say if you ever stand before the summit and look into the flame, you will see the world as it once was, and as it could be, not as a vision, not as a prophecy, but as a feeling, a deep knowing, a gentle ache behind the heart. The light is older than empires, older than names. It remembers when people sang to rivers and whispered to trees, when stars were called but Namand answered. No one knows when the light will fade, or if it ever will. Perhaps it burns because the pact is still needed, because balance is still fragile, because some truths do not diven when forgotten, and so it shines every night, every season, atop a mountain. No one climbs, no one maps, no one dares name. A flame that holds the last memory of harmony, of promise, of peace, waiting for the day someone remembers, not where it is, but why it is, and perhaps one night in a dream you will see it too, and you will understand. The library that remembers you. It was said that no map bore its location, no road led to its doorstep, no signpost marked its entrance, yet those who needed it found it. The library stood at the edge of fog, where forest met time, where silence folded in upon itself like parchment too often read. Its windows were tall and thin, arched like the backs of cats startled in dream. Glass panes clouded with age, winking faint reflections of moons no longer overhead. No one remembered building it, and yet it had always been there. You arrived on a night when the stars blinked out one by one, as if even they did not wish to. Watch, the door opened before you knocked. It always did. Inside the air smelled of ink and secrets, of candle wax melted over centuries, and dust that never settled. The shelves towered above, curling around the domed ceiling, like the ribcage of something once living. Each book nestled not just in place, but in memory, because this library did not forget, and neither did the books. They watched, they whispered, they turned pages when no hand touched them. At the center stood a desk, always the same, always waiting. On it, a quill that never ran dry, and a book, blank but not empty. Not for you when you sat. It opened to a page you hadn't seen since childhood. Not in dream, not in memory, but in the moment before waking, when reality softens its grip. Your handwriting was already there, describing things you hadn't yet done, names you hadn't yet spoken, rooms you hadn't yet entered. And yet it was all true, because the library remembers you, as you were, as you are, as you might become if only you turned one more page. You wandered the aisles not to search, but to be found. There was a corridor that hadn't been there before, narrow, breathless, lined with volumes bound in fabric that pulsed with warmth. As if the books were breathing, each bore your name, written in a script that shimmered faintly like dew at twilight. You pulled one, opened it, inside a conversation, between your thoughts and a voice that was not yours, yet it knew you, knew your silence, knew your fears folded in drawer corners, knew the words you never wrote because you feared they would be real. Time does not move in the library, or rather it waits. It waits for you to remember what the world helped you forget. You walk past an alcove. In it, a mirror, but not your reflection. Instead, a memory. You, at age 6, reading by flashlight, under blanket fortresses, believing in every sentence as if it were a promise. The mirror did not speak. It didn't need to, because the memory was enough. You opened another book. It contained no words, only smells. Cinnamon from a long-closed kitchen, the sea salt of a summer now lost, smoke from a fire you never admitted missing. Some shelves hummed with songs, not melodies, but feelings, the music of days that only your soul remembered. You climbed the staircase that spiraled endlessly, each step a question you once asked, each landing an answer you never heard, but always knew at the top. A single book, no title, just your handprint, pressed into the cover like a fossil. You hesitated, then touched it, and in that moment, the library exhaled, the windows warmed, the shelves leaned inward, embracing your presence, and the book opened to your next chapter, blank, waiting, not for a story to begin, but for you to remember you were already part of one. You placed the quill to paper, not to write, but to return, and as the ink flowed, the candle beside you flickered one sand, then held steady. The library had remembered you, and now you would remember it forever. The collector of abandoned time. There is a house no one remembers building. It stands at the edge of a forgotten street, where the streetlights flicker without rhythm, and the cobblestones feel warm to the touch, as if they've stored centuries of sun and footsteps and stories too shy to speak. The house has no number. Its windows are not broken, but neither are they clean. Behind them curtains made of dust, folded in stillness, folded in time. No one is ever seen going in. No one is ever seen coming out. And yet, every night, as the clock nears a moment you can't quite name, a light glows dimly within, a soft golden breath, like a candle lit inside a memory. This is the home of the collector of abandoned time. He is not a man, or a woman, or a ghost. He is simply the caretaker of hours that no longer belong to anyone. Lost time. The seconds people waste with idle fear. The minutes left behind in grief. The hours stolen by forgetfulness. The years no one wants to speak of again. He keeps them, carefully, lovingly, as if time itself were a garden, and every neglected moment a fallen petal he gently lifts and presses between the pages of an enormous, breathing book. Inside the house, the air smells like clocks, not ticking, but resting, like clocks that once kept perfect time and were then set aside, because they reminded someone of a voice that no longer answered or of laughter that ended too soon. The rooms are endless. They do not follow geometry. You walk down a corridor and find yourself outside in a courtyard with no sky, only ceilings, made of shadow and starlight that drips slowly like melting wax. Each room is a memory that time forgot to take with it. A cafe booth with a warm cup of tea forever untouched. A park bench beneath a rainstorm that never waits the ground. A school desk with the name Clara scratched into the wood, a heart drawn beside it. Half finished, the collector walks silently through these rooms. He does not age, he does not speak, he listens, and when a moment we thought was lost whispers, again a laugh in the back of someone's mind, a dream they almost remembered, he smiles, because that means someone, somewhere, has reached back, touched the edge of what they thought was gone forever, and given it meaning again. There is a bell in the house. It does not ring like metal, it rings like breath, like the first breath, taken after waking from a dream you weren't sure you had. When the bell sounds, the collector kneels before a wooden cabinet carved with vines and hours and seconds and sighs inside. A new hour has arrived, trembling, unclaimed, afraid to be forgotten. He takes it gently, wraps it in silk spun from twilight, and adds it to the shelf between a summer afternoon lost to illness and a winter morning, never spoken of again. Sometimes he finds time people have tried to throw away, time filled with pain or shame, or silence too loud to hold. He does not judge them, he cradles them, and lets them rest until they are ready to become part of a story someone can finally tell. The walls of the house shift, not like buildings, but like forests. You do not walk the same hallway twice. You do not find your way out unless time allows it, unless the collector finds a moment you yourself have lost and returns it to you with a gesture, a hush, a breath. Some say he was once human, a child who never knew a birthday, a man who never kept a clock, a woman who watched the stars and wept for the hours they held. No one knows. He wears a cloak made of calendars, each page blank, each one waiting to be remembered. He walks with bare feet, and where he steps, you feel like you've been there before, in your dreams. In a pause between thoughts, in the spaces between one heartbeat and the next, sometimes, if you listen closely at night, when the fire has dimmed and your thoughts grow soft, you might hear the collector pass by your door, carrying a second you, once lost when you were too sad to notice. He is not here to return it, only to show you it was never truly gone, that no time is ever wasted. If someone remembers it, even if that someone is a silent keeper in a house that breathes at the end of a forgotten road, a house with windows of stillness, curtains of dust, and lights that flicker with the soft, golden pulse of ours no longer alone. You might forget this story when you wake, but somewhere inside your sleep, a part of you will remember the touch of time being held with care, and the hush of a collector's hand, sheltering a moment you thought no longer mattered, until it did, until it does. The Lamplighter's Journal. There is a city that never sleeps, not because it is restless, but because it is endlessly waiting. Each evening, just as the sky bruises into dusk, a figure appears in the narrow alleys, his lantern, long and curved, like an ancient shepherd's crook, glows with a light that is not quite gold, not quite amber more, like the memory of warmth itself. He is the lamplighter. No one has seen his face. No one has ever walked beside him, but they know he is there. For every night, without fail, the lamps ignite, one by one, across the winding streets, the bridges of stone, the empty plazas where fountains have long since dried. No one knows who built the lamps. They have no fuel, no flame, no wires hidden beneath the cobblestones. They simply light up, and as they do, the city exhales, as if relieved to be seen once more. The lamplighter walks the same route each evening, but no two nights are ever the same, because the city itself is alive with stories. Every flicker of his lantern stirs a memory in the bricks, in the mist that rolls along the canals, in the hollow ring of a distant bell. There is an old journal that no one knows about. It rests in a library with no walls, on a shelf made of fog, in a room that only appears when the first lamp is lit. This is the lamplighter's journal. It contains every evening he has ever walked, but the pages are not filled with words. Instead, they are filled with light, soft traces of illumination pressed between translucent sheets, capturing the exact hue and breath of every night's first glow. The journal grows heavier with each passing century, yet the lamplighter carries it without effort, tucked beneath his cloak, close to his chest. If one were to open it, they would not find dates or locations, only the quiet pulse of nights. Remembered, there is a legend whispered among the few who believe in him, that if you follow the lamplight not too close, not too far, you will eventually reach the end of his route, and there, beyond the final lamp, you will find a place where the city folds into itself, where the streets narrow until they are barely the width of a breath, and beyond that, a lamp that has never been lit. The lamplighter pauses here. Every night he places his hand upon the cold iron, but he never lights it. No one knows why. Some say that, when he does, the city will wake completely, shedding its mist and memory to become something new. Others say that the last lamp is a promise, a vow he made long ago to someone who never returned. Still others believe it marks the boundary between time and forgetting. What is certain is this: the lamplighter's journal ends with a blank page, waiting for the moment he will finally set the last lamp aglow. Until then, he walks, his lantern casting gentle circles of light on ancient stone, his footsteps silent but steady, his presence known only through the hush of lamps breathing awake. And every night, the city watches and waits, just like he does. The violin beneath the stone floor. There is a room, forgotten. Its walls crumble softly, brick by brick, as the years slip past in silence. Above, a cracked ceiling lets through thin threads of light, silver and cold. But beneath the floor, something remains, something plays every night as the shadows lengthen and the last of the day's warmth disappears. A sound begins, a single note, low, mournful, a violin, not played by human hands, but by something else, by memory, by time itself, by sorrow that has nowhere else to go. The floor is made of ancient stone, each slab worn smooth by footsteps long forgotten. No door leads to what is beneath, no staircase descends, and yet, each night, always at the same hour, the music begins, a simple melody, a lament. It rises slowly from beneath the stones, winding through the cracks, curling like mist along the base of the walls. It fills the air of the forgotten room, but only for those who choose to hear it. Most pass by unaware. To them, it is only the creak of old wood, the sigh of settling stone. But for those who linger, who stop, who close their eyes, the violin's voice becomes unmistakable, a voice of longing, of loss, of something left unfinished. Legends tell of the one who played it first, a violinist, they say, who once lived in the house above, a master of his art, a man whose melodies could make even the birds fall silent to listen. But he was lonely, and in his final days he played only for himself, hidden away from the world that had forgotten him. When he died, they say he was buried with his violin, right there, beneath the stone floor of his favorite room. But the violin did not stay silent, not for long. Soon, the faintest strains of his music were heard again. As night crept in and the stars blinked awake, at first they thought it was imagination, but it happened again and again, always the same melody, always the same hour. No one could explain it. No one dared remove the stones to look. Instead, they left the room as it was. They let it be. The house above has long since been abandoned. Its windows shattered, its doors crooked on their hinges. But the room beneath still waits, still breathes, and still plays. Some nights the melody grows bolder. It climbs higher and higher, weaving itself into intricate patterns of sound that echo through the cold stone walls. Other nights it is barely there, a whisper of a song, almost lost in the hush of midnight. But it is always the same melody, always the same sorrow. Some say the violin plays for the one who left it behind. Others believe it plays for those who dare to remember, those who pause at the threshold of the room and feel, without knowing why, that they are not alone, that something, someone, is still here, listening, playing, waiting. There are stories of travelers who have wandered into the house, drawn by something they could not name. They tell of standing above the cold stone floor, feeling the vibrations of the music in the soles of their feet. Some fall to their knees, overwhelmed by the weight of it. Others flee, unable to bear the grief woven into each note. But none forget. None ever forget the song. Once you've heard it, it stays with you. It lingers like the scent of rain in the air. Long after the storm has passed, there are those who believe the violin will play forever. That as long as the stones remain, as long as the room is not disturbed, the melody will continue, night after night, century after century. But there are others who fear the day when someone, bold or foolish, will pry up the stones and look beneath. What will they find? The violin, the remains of the one who played it, or nothing at all, only the cold earth, and the silence left in place of the song, until then the violin plays on, unafraid of the passing years, unafraid of being forgotten. It sings beneath the stone floor, hidden from the world, but alive in its own secret way. If you ever find yourself in a place that feels too quiet to still listen carefully, you might just hear it, the faintest strain of a violin, rising from beneath your feet, telling its story, again and again and again, forever. The house that waits without doors. There is a field, wide, empty, silent. No roads lead to it, no paths cross it, only wild grass grows there, tall and golden, swaying softly in the wind that never stops. And in the middle of that field, a house, standing, alone, untouched by time, untouched by weather, untouched by anyone. No one knows who built it, or when, or why. It has no doors. None, not on the front, not at the back, not on the sides, only walls, smooth, unbroken, and windows, tall, narrow windows, set like watching eyes into the pale wooden frame, but they do not open. They have never opened. The house sits in perfect stillness, as if waiting for something daught or someone from afar. It looks abandoned, empty, forgotten, but those who have dared to walk through the tall grass, those who have stood close enough to place a trembling hand against the cold, sealed walls, they tell a different story at night, when the stars prick holes in the dark sky, when the wind hushes and the field grows quiet. The house changes, light faint, at first, then stronger, soft, golden light spills from the windows, casting long, crooked shadows across the wild grass, and then footsteps inside, moving by pacing, as if someone or something walks from room to room, but there is no way in, no way out, no door to open, no lock to turn. Yet the sounds are clear, unmistakable boots on old wooden floors, a chair scraping across the ground, a faint sigh, perhaps a whisper, but no words anyone has ever understood. The lights stay on for hours, sometimes until just before dawn. Then, as the sky softens and the first birds begin to sing, the light fades, the footsteps stop, and the house returns to silence, as if nothing ever happened. No one has ever seen anyone enter. No one has ever seen anyone leave. The house simply waits. Some say it has always been there, long before the fields grew wild, long before there were fences, before there were roads, before there were even maps. There are stories, old stories, passed down in quiet voices by those who live in the villages nearby. They speak of the house as if it were alive, as if it listens, as if it knows when someone stands outside, watching. Some claim that on certain nights the house's windows reflect not the field, but faces, unfamiliar faces, pressed close to the glass from inside, staring out waiting. Others say that the house shifts when no one is looking, that it moves, inch by inch, closer to the edges of the field, closer to the places where people live, but no one has ever seen it move, not with their own eyes. And yet, the stories persist. One tale tells of a man who tried to open the house. He brought tools, hammers, pry bars. He came at noon, when the sun was high and the house was quiet. He struck at the walls, but the wood did not splinter, did not crack, did not even scratch. He left before the sun set. He did not want to be there. At night, no one does, because that is when the house wakes. Some say the footsteps belong to the house itself, that it walks through its own rooms, remembering, searching for what no one knows. Others believe that someone is trapped inside, locked within walls that will never open, forced to walk and walk forever. But the truth is, no one knows, and the house does not tell. It simply waits, day after day, night after night, through storms, through snow, through seasons that change and change again, unwoven, unchanged, except for the lights and the footsteps that come only after. Dark, there are those who still visit, drawn by curiosity or by something else, something they cannot quite name. They stand in the field, surrounded by the rustle of dry grass, and watch the house from a distance. Some say they hear their own names, whispered from the windows, soft, faint, like a memory they almost forgot. Others feel nothing, only cold, and the heavy weight of something unseen pressing down on their chest. But no, one stays long, not after the lights come on, not after the first footsteps sound, because the house, though it has no doors, is not empty, and it never has been. If you find yourself near that field, if you see the house rising from the grass, its windows dull and lifeless by day, you might be tempted to approach, to stand at its walls, to press your ear against the cold wood and listen for whatever lives within. But know this, when night falls, the house will wake, the lights will glow, the footsteps will begin, and though there are no doors, you might wonder if something inside can still get out, so walk away. Let the house wait, as it always has, as it always will. In the middle of a field where no one passes, a house without doors that never stops waiting. The lantern keeper of the forgotten pier, at the edge of a silent bay, where the mist thickens with every breath of the sea, there lies a pier forgotten by time. The wood is old, its planks soft and grey with rot, their edges worn smooth by decades of tides that come and go with quiet indifference. The barnacles clutch at the submerged beams, and seaweed sways gently beneath the surface, as if dancing to a song that only the water remembers. No ships come here anymore, no laughter echoes across the timbers, no cargo is heaved onto the dock. Only the sea remains, and the wind and the patient creak of old ropes that still hang, frayed and purposeless, from rusted iron rings. Yet each night, as the sun sinks behind the jagged teeth of distant cliffs, and darkness spreads slowly over the water, a lantern is lit, a small flame contained within a glass chamber, protected from the salt spray and the restless wind. is coaxed to life by a hand as weathered as the pier itself. The lantern keeper, no one knows his name. No one remembers when he first began his vigil. He simply is. A figure in a heavy coat, buttons dulled by years of use, boots that leave faint, wet prints along the length of the pier, only to be washed away by the next tide. His steps are slow, measured, as though walking this path is not just habit, but ritual. Each evening, he descends from the small, crumbling shack that rests at the base of the cliffs, a shack that barely holds against the storms, its shutters hanging askew, its roof patched with bits of driftwood and sailcloth. From within, there is no light. Only the keeper emerges, a lantern in hand, moving toward the pier with the steadiness of someone who has done this for a lifetime, or perhaps longer. The lantern's glow is soft, golden, its reflection rippling in the dark waters below, like a trembling coin dropped into an endless well. He walks to the very end of the pier, to the last post where an iron ring still juts out from the timber, though it has not secured a mooring line in many years. And there he places the lantern on a small hook, where it sways gently with the wind, casting arcs of pale light through the mist that drapes the bay like a curtain. He stands there for a long time, sometimes leaning on the rail, sometimes sitting on an overturned crate, gazing out across the water. Some nights, when the fog is thin, he can see the distant outline of another shore, or perhaps it is only his memory filling the emptiness with shapes that once meant something. Other nights, the mist is so thick that even the water below disappears, and it feels as though he is standing at the edge of the world itself, suspended in a sea of cloud and silence. Locals tell stories about him. Some say he is waiting for a ship that left long ago and never returned. Others whisper that he is a ghost, bound to the pier by promises made and broken long before any of them were born. Few have claimed to see another figure standing beside him in the fog, a woman in a dress of pale linen, her face hidden beneath a hood, her hand resting lightly on his arm as they both stare out to sea, silent together in their vigil. But most never see the keeper at all. Only the light, burning steadily at the end of the pier, as they pass by on distant roads, or look out from the windows of their warm homes far above the cliffs. The lantern is always there, a small, stubborn flame in defiance of the darkness that has claimed the rest of the pier. On rare nights, when the moon is full and the tide is high, a heron might land on one of the pilings, its long legs steady as it watches the keeper with the same quiet curiosity. Seals sometimes surface near the beams, their slick heads emerging briefly before slipping back beneath the surface, their presence acknowledged only by the faintest splash. The keeper notices them all, but he never speaks. He simply watches and waits. In his mind, perhaps, there are echoes of voices that once filled this place, the bark of orders from captains, the laughter of sailors unloading crates of exotic wares, the creak of wheels as carts carried goods away from the docks. Now, there is only the steady lap of the water, the sighing wind, and the faint crackle of the lantern's flame as it consumes the oil drop by precious drop. The seasons change. Around him, in the winter, ice forms at the edges of the beams, and the lantern's glow seems sharper, its light cutting through the brittle air like a promise of warmth. In the spring, small flowers bloom in the cracks between the planks, and gulls wheel overhead, their cries echoing across the empty bay. Summer brings storms, waves battering the pilings and sending sheets of rain across the pier, but still the keeper descends. From his shack, shielding the flame with his body until he reaches the end and the lantern is secured once more. And in the autumn, when the fog grows thicker and the nights come sooner, he walks, as always, undeterred, a solitary figure moving through a world that most have forgotten exists. Sometimes, on the calmest nights, if you stand very still at the edge of the cliffs, you might hear a faint, rhythmic sound, the tap of his boots on the old wood, the clink of the lantern's hook as it settles, and then nothing, only the sea and the light, and the memory of all the ships that once found their way home by following that very flame. Long after the last ship has sailed, long after the keeper's own story has been folded quietly into the mist, the lantern will continue to burn, its glow eternal, a beacon not for ships, but for the idea that some lights, once kindled, should never be allowed to fade. The clock without hands. At the center of an abandoned square, surrounded by crumbling stones and walls overtaken by ivy, stands a clock tower that no longer tells time as most understand it. High above the empty streets, its circular face stares outward, blank and pale, for the hands that once swept across its surface are long gone. No tick, no chime, no hourly toll disturbs the stillness. Yet, in some strange, imperceptible way, the clock still keeps time, beneath the surface. Gears, once driven by careful engineering, now shift softly, guided by forces long forgotten, moving without purpose, or perhaps with a purpose that no one remains to interpret. The wind passes through the open arches of the tower, turning the air into a slow, melodic breath, as though the building itself is exhaling the years it has quietly collected. Vines snake their way through cracks in the stone, curling around the iron teeth of ancient cogs, wrapping the clock in a gentle, green embrace. The townspeople who once gathered beneath this tower to meet, to celebrate, to mourn, are gone. Their footsteps, once lively on the cobblestones, are now replaced by the hush of fallen leaves stirred by the occasional breeze. Yet the clock remains. It does not resist the erosion of time. It does not cry out for repair. It simply persists, its mechanisms turning silently in the dark, measuring something more delicate than hours or minutes, perhaps the slow decay of stone, the subtle drift of seasons, or the gradual retreat of memory itself. Sometimes, on certain days when the light slants just right, a faint glint can be seen deep within the hollow of the tower, the glimmer of a brass gear, or the shimmer of a polished wheel that still, despite everything, moves. Tourists no longer visit this place. The path through the woods is overgrown, the guideposts faded, the benches around the square slowly collapsing under the weight of moss and rain. But birds nest within the tower's crevices, and at dusk their songs weave through the empty arches, like threads of sound stitched into the silence. At night, when the moon is high, the blank face of the clock catches its light, glowing faintly, as if remembering what it once was, a beacon of certainty in a world measured by schedules and bells. Now, without hands, without numerals even, it has become something else entirely, a reminder perhaps that time does not require witnesses to pass. It does not need hands to be real. It does not need chimes to be heard. It moves invisibly, patiently, through the turning of unseen gears and the slow crumbling of stones. Sometimes, if you stand at the foot of the tower and place your hand gently upon its wall, you might feel a faint vibration, a subtle pulse deep within its core, not a heartbeat, but something older, colder, and more enduring, the slow, methodical turning of a clock that has lost its purpose but not its function. The clock without hands still keeps time, but it measures not the hours left in a day, nor the days left in a life, but the quiet, inevitable unfolding of everything that once was into everything that will one day be forgotten. And so it remains, standing silent beneath the shifting sky, marking the passage of time in a language no one now remembers, but which continues, nonetheless, to be spoken. The shop that never opens. There is a narrow street, hidden within the folds of a city that most maps have stopped recording. The stones underfoot are uneven, polished by centuries of steps that no longer fall, and at the end of this winding alley, bathed only in the pale light that manages to slip through the crowded roofs above, there stands a shop with windows always dark, its door always locked, its bell never ringing. The faded letters on the sign above the door spell out a name, but time has weathered them to the point where they are little more than ghosts of language, traces of meaning lost to erosion and rain. Yet the shop remains. No dust gathers on the threshold. No weeds push through the cracks around its frame. It is as if the very air around it has agreed to pause, to hold its breath for as long as the shop does not open, day after day. The city moves on around it. The morning vendors wheel their carts past, calling out their wares. The cats leap from windowsills and disappear into doorways. The bells of distant trams echo faintly through the alley, marking hours that the shop itself does not observe. No one remembers what the shop once sold. Some say it was a bookshop, its shelves lined with rare editions and forgotten manuscripts that whispered to one another at night. Others claim it was a tailor's boutique, where fine silks and brocades once draped mannequins, now long gone, their forms crumbling into dust. A few insist it was a cafe, where, in some other time, laughter and steam from coffee cups mingled beneath the golden light of glass lamps that have since gone dark. But there is no certainty, no ledgers, no records, only the shop itself, standing there, silent and closed, defying the insistence of days and nights to move forward. The shutters are always drawn, yet those who linger in front of the door claim to feel warmth radiating from within, as though behind those walls a hearth still glows and footsteps still move across old wooden floors. But no one enters. No key has ever fit the lock. No hand has ever managed to turn the handle. There are those who pass by in haste, avoiding the shop entirely, as if afraid that their curiosity might awaken something best left undisturbed. Others pause, perhaps driven by some vague memory or a sensation they cannot name, to rest their palm against the cold surface of the door, hoping to catch some faint echo from whatever exists beyond it. At dusk, the alley fills with shadows, and the shop becomes indistinguishable from the walls that flank it. It is only in the quietest moments, when the city holds still, that it feels present again, not as a place of commerce, but as an idea, a lingering trace of something that once mattered deeply to someone. Children growing up in the neighborhood are warned not to play near it. Their parents tell them old stories of how the shop has been there for as long as anyone can remember, and perhaps even longer than that. Some say the shopkeeper left suddenly and locked the door behind them, but no one recalls ever seeing that figure. Others believe the shop is waiting for a particular person, on a particular day, when all the conditions of time and chance finally align. But that day has not come, not yet. seasons pass. The rain polishes the stones of the alley. The ivy climbs higher along the brick walls nearby. The city forgets little things, the names of old residents, the origins of faded statues, the purposes of streets that twist without clear destination. And in all that forgetting, the shop remains. Becomes easier to believe that it has always been closed, that it was never meant to open, that its locked door is its only true purpose. Yet, sometimes, in the deepest hours of night, when even the most restless inhabitants have drifted to sleep, a faint sound can be heard from within, not the creak of settling beams or the sigh of old walls adjusting to the cold, but something more deliberate, the sound of papers being shuffled, or the clink of porcelain being set gently upon a saucer, perhaps even the murmur of a voice reading softly, though no one is there to listen. It is a sound that fades as quickly as it comes, leaving only silence in its place. Visitors to the city sometimes hear of the shop through whispered directions or in the footnotes of obscure guidebooks. They make their way through the labyrinth of streets, find the alley, stand before the shop's ancient door, and feel the curious stillness that surrounds it. Some knock, their hands trembling with the hope of discovery. But there is no answer. There is never an answer, and so they leave, carrying with them not the satisfaction of having entered, but the quiet memory of a place that does not need visitors to continue existing. The shop remains, as it always has, a fixed point in a city that shifts around it, a question that offers no answer, a story that tells itself through the simple act of not being told. Perhaps that is its purpose, not to sell, not to serve, but to remind that not every door is meant to open, that some mysteries are more beautiful when they remain unsolved, and so the shop waits behind its locked door, beneath its faded sign, as the world turns endlessly beyond its threshold, waiting, always waiting, for something or perhaps nothing at all. The river that only flows at night. There is a place deep within the folds of forgotten landscapes, where a river exists only after the sun has set by day. Its bed is nothing more than a hollow trace through the valley, a quiet indentation, strewn with smooth stones, parched earth, and the brittle skeletons of reeds that crackle faintly in the breeze to the unknowing eye. It is a place abandoned by water, an ancient memory of movement that has long since run dry. But when night descends, and the sky darkens into velvet blue, something begins to stir from the far reaches of the valley. Beyond sight and sound, a low murmur awakens, the faintest whisper of liquid finding its course once more. A silver thread unravels through the dry bed, quietly weaving its way between stones that have not felt its touch since the night before, and within minutes, the hollow path is filled, a slender, shimmering river that slides effortlessly through the valley, as if it had always been there, as if the daylight hours were merely a pause in its endless journey. The water is cold, clearer than memory, and it carries with it the scent of distant glaciers and forgotten rains. Those who have seen it say that it moves with a kind of grace that is impossible to describe, as though it is not bound by the weight of the earth, but instead floats just above it, a ribbon of light drawn delicately through the darkness. No one knows where the river begins, no spring marks its source, no snowmold feeds its flow. It simply exists, emerging when the sun's last light fades beyond the horizon, and vanishing again with the dawn, leaving no trace of its presence except for the faint sheen it leaves upon the stones. like the afterimage of a dream that cannot quite be recalled upon waking. The animals of the valley know its rhythm well at dusk. They gather along its invisible banks, waiting patiently in the silent twilight for the first cool drops to appear. Deer step carefully to the edge, lowering their heads to drink from waters that they know will be gone by morning. Foxes pause in their hunts, pausing to lap at the current before disappearing once more into the undergrowth. Even the birds, silent by night, watch from low branches, their feathers ruffled softly by the breeze that always seems to accompany the river's arrival. No human settlement exists near the river. Perhaps once there were villages, small outposts tucked into the folds of the valley where lanterns glowed. By windows and footsteps marked the earth. But if there were, they are long gone now, swallowed by the quiet persistence of time and solitude. Now, only wanderers, those rare few who stray from mapped roads and well-worn trails, find their way to the valley and catch sight of the river that moves in darkness. Some believe that it is an illusion, a trick of light and shadow, or a mirage, conjured by exhaustion and night air. Others whisper that the river is a boundary, a liminal thread separating the waking world from something else, something older and less easily named. There are legends, of course, stories passed from voice to voice about travelers who followed the river upstream, walking alongside its shimmering path through the deepest hours of the night, only to vanish entirely, their names slipping quietly from memory like the river itself at dawn. Other tales speak of those who dared to sleep beside its banks, only to awaken before sunrise to find the river gone, their camps surrounded by nothing but dry stone and the soft rustle of wind through empty reeds. But the river, indifferent to these stories, continues its silent ritual. Each night it moves, without hesitation, without witness, except for the quiet creatures of the valley and the occasional distant star reflected upon its surface. Its waters carry no boats, no bridges cross it. It is not a river to be tamed or charted, but one to be observed from a respectful distance, to be acknowledged as one might acknowledge the passing of clouds or the turning of seasons. It is a reminder that not all things follow the rhythms we expect, that there are movements in this world which elude the insistence of clocks and calendars, which exist only when we are least prepared to witness them. At the first pale light of dawn, the river begins to retreat, not all at once, but gradually, as though reluctant to leave the stones it has smoothed through countless nights. The current slows, thins, and finally disappears, sinking into the earth or evaporating into the morning mist. No one can say for certain by the time the sun crests the distant hills. The river is gone entirely, leaving behind only a dry bed and the faintest impression of moisture that will soon be claimed by the warming air. And so the valley returns to stillness, waiting quietly for night to come again, for the sun to fall, and for the river to reappear as it always does, silent, unseen by most, yet steady in its purpose. Perhaps it is not the river that moves through the valley, but the valley that waits each night to receive the river, a conversation between earth and water, spoken only under the cover of darkness, never meant for human ears. And so, in this quiet corner of the world, the river that only flows at night continues its timeless cycle, carving its unseen path through stone and memory, forever patient, forever elusive. The painter who never finished a canvas. in a small attic studio at the end of a narrow, forgotten street, there once lived a painter who never finished a single canvas. The walls of the room were lined with countless frames, each holding images, suspended in a state of beautiful incompletion. Brushstrokes paused mid-motion, colors blending but never settling, forms that hinted at landscapes, faces, and dreams, but always stopped just before becoming whole. The painter would rise early, long before the first light crept across the cobblestones, and sit quietly before one of these canvases, contemplating it in the pale, grey hush of dawn. He would lift his brush, mix his paints with meticulous care, and begin to move colour across fabric, with an intensity that filled the silent room with something like breath. Hours would pass this way, the window slowly brightening, the world outside stirring to life, but inside the studio, time seemed to flow differently, slowly, softly, as though it too were reluctant to impose its usual order. At some point, without fail, the painter would set his brush down and lean back in his chair, studying the canvas with eyes that held neither satisfaction nor frustration, but something more elusive, a quiet understanding that the work was not meant to be complete. He would stand, wipe his hands carefully, and move to the next canvas, where he would begin again, adding a layer here, a gesture there, but always leaving the image just on the cusp of becoming. Visitors rarely found their way to this attic studio. The street was easy to miss, its entrance veiled by ivy and long shadows, and even those who passed by seldom noticed the faint scent of oil paint or the faint glow of lamplight from the window above. But those who did climb the creaking stairs and enter the studio were always struck by the same sensation, a quiet, profound stillness, a space not filled with incomplete works, but with endless beginnings. Each canvas seemed alive in its own way, as though waiting for a final touch that would never come, and in that waiting, they possessed a strange, aching beauty. Some of the paintings were nearly finished, portraits with eyes that seemed moments away from blinking, landscapes where the sun hovered just below the horizon, buildings whose doors remained forever ajar. Others were little more than suggestion, a single arc of colour, a curve that implied a hand or a wing, a shadow without a source, but all shared the same fate. They would remain always. On the edge of realization, no one knew why, the painter never finished his work. Some said he was a perfectionist, unable to declare anything complete for fear that it would fall short of the image he held in his mind. Others believed he found more joy in the act of creating than in the final result, that for him the beauty was in the becoming, not the being. There were even whispers, in some circles, that he feared the silence that completion would bring, that once a painting was finished, it would no longer need him. And so he left them all forever dependent on his daily attention. But the painter himself never offered an explanation. He simply continued his quiet routine, day after day, season after season, year upon year, adding, layering, pausing, moving on. Those who knew him said that he never seemed hurried, never frustrated by the mounting collection of unfinished canvases that filled his studio and, eventually, spilled out into adjoining rooms. Instead, he carried with him a calm certainty, as though he understood something about art, and perhaps about life itself, that others had not yet realized, that there is, perhaps, a particular grace in things left incomplete, that in the spaces where the brush does not touch, where the story is not fully told, there is room for mystery, for imagination, for the viewer to step in and become part of the creation. As years passed, the painter aged quietly in his attic studio, his hair graying, his hands growing slower, but no less steady. The canvases continued to multiply, each one bearing the unmistakable signature of his vision, not scrawled in ink, but imprinted in the very decision to stop short, to pause, to leave space. When he finally passed, sitting in his chair before an unfinished portrait of a woman whose face was only half revealed, his brushes neatly arranged at his side, the townspeople entered his studio and found themselves surrounded by hundreds of these silent, waiting works. Some wished to finish them, to bring them to completion, but none dared to try, for they understood, in that quiet, dust-filled attic, that these paintings were not incomplete out of neglect, but out of intention, that the painter had not failed to finish them, but had chosen not to, as an act of devotion to the moment of creation itself. And so the canvases remained, as they always had been, half-formed, half-dreamed, full of quiet promise and unanswered questions. Now, when the attic door creaks open, and a beam of sunlight cuts across the faded floorboards, the studio still feels alive, as though the painter has merely stepped out for a moment, leaving his brushes poised for their next stroke. The air still carries the faint scent of linseed oil and pigment, and the canvases continue to wait, patient and silent, inviting each visitor to stand before them and imagine what might have been, what still could be, and what perhaps was never meant to fully take shape. For some stories are not meant to end, some creations are not meant to be finished, and in their incompletion they become something else entirely, timeless, enduring, forever suspended between the first stroke and the last. The bridge that leads nowhere. At the edge of an ancient forest, beyond the last worn path, there is a bridge that leads nowhere. Its wooden planks, weathered by rain and softened by moss, stretch gracefully over a silent ravine where no water flows. The handrails, once sturdy, are now wrapped in ivy, as though nature itself is trying to reclaim what was left behind. No one remembers who built the bridge. No one recalls where it was meant to go, and yet it still stands, strong enough to bear the weight of those curious enough to walk its length. Visitors rarely find it. The forest paths twist and meander, leading most wanderers away before they ever glimpse the pale shape of the bridge through the trees. But sometimes, when the fog settles low and the air is thick with quiet, someone will stumble upon it, a solitary figure pausing at the first plank, peering across to the other side, where there is only more forest. No signs, no destination, just the bridge, arching gracefully into emptiness. The villagers in the nearest town tell stories about it. They say that long ago, before the forest grew dense and the ravine ran dry, the bridge connected to worlds, that on the other side there was once a village, a market square, a place of warmth and life. But now, nothing remains, just trees and silence. Some say the bridge was cursed, built by someone trying to escape, only to realize that no bridge can truly carry you away from what is inside yourself. Others believe it was constructed by a dreamer, someone who knew that not every path needs a destination, that sometimes the journey itself is the purpose. If you stand at the center of the bridge and close your eyes, you can feel it sway gently with the breeze, as though still alive, still reaching out across the space that it was meant to span. The boards beneath your feet creak softly, a language of their own, whispering stories of all those who have walked here before. The travelers, the seekers, the ones who turned back, and the ones who never did. The ravine below is filled with ferns and stones, and the twisted roots of trees that have grown up in the absence of water at night. When the moon is full, the pale light reflects off the moss, and the bridge appears to glow, as though illuminated from within. Foxes sometimes use it to cross from one part of the forest to another, their silent steps leaving only the faintest impressions on the damp wood. Birds perch on its rails, singing songs that echo through the empty space, where a river once flowed, but no human has crossed it in many years, at least. Not completely. Most who find it stop part way, standing at the center, looking out into the tangle of forest ahead, and then, without realizing why, turn back. Perhaps it is the weight of the unknown that holds them, or the quiet realization that crossing the bridge would not bring them to anything they do not already carry within themselves. Or perhaps it is simply the understanding that some bridges are not meant to take you anywhere. They are meant to remind you that standing still can be just as profound as moving forward, that looking out over a space where something once was, but is no longer, can be a kind of pilgrimage in itself. The bridge, for all its age and wear, does not protest, it does not beckon, nor does it warn. It simply exists, an elegant arc of wood and vine and time, reaching out across emptiness, holding space for whoever chooses to pause and listen to what is not there. Some say that if you walk the bridge at dawn, when the mist is thickest, you can almost see the outlines of what once stood on the other side, shadows of rooftops, the faint curve of a bell tower, the suggestion of a life that has long since faded away. But as the sun rises, these shapes vanish, leaving only the quiet forest and the bridge that leads nowhere. And yet, for those who have stood upon it, who have felt the give of the wood beneath their feet, who have listened to the soft sigh of the wind passing through the ivy, the bridge does not feel like a place of loss. It feels like a threshold, a point, where past and present, absence and presence, all converge in a delicate, unspoken balance. The villagers say that the bridge will stand until the forest finally swallows it whole, until the ivy grows thick enough to pull the railings down and the planks rot away into the earth below. But for now, it remains patient, silent, waiting for the next traveler who might stumble upon it, pause at its edge, and wonder, for a long, quiet moment, whether to cross, and whether, in doing so, they are seeking a place, or simply a feeling that they have long since forgotten. Perhaps that is the true destination of all bridges that lead nowhere, not a place, but a realization, not a crossing, but a pause, not an arrival, but an understanding. That sometimes the most profound journeys are the ones that do not take us anywhere at all. The bookshop that only appears in rain. There is a narrow alleyway hidden between two tall brick buildings, where the stones of the pavement are always slick. Even on dry days, most walk past it without noticing. But when the rain comes, a slow, steady rain, not a storm, the alley changes. A faint golden glow spills out from within, soft and warm, cutting through the mist. If you follow that glow, you will find it, the bookshop. A wooden sign swings gently above the door, its letters faded with age, but still legible. Arcadia Books. The door is always open, just enough for you to push it further with a quiet creak inside. The smell of paper and rainwater fills the air. The floorboards sigh beneath your feet, welcoming you as though they've known you for years. Tall shelves stretch up into the shadows, lined with books of every kind, some with cracked leather spines, others bound in silk, many with no titles at all. Each one seems to hum softly, as though aware of your presence. There is no one at the counter, no bell to announce your arrival, and yet it feels as though someone is watching, perhaps from behind the stacks, or seated in a deep armchair in a corner you cannot quite see. But when you walk toward the sound of the rain tapping against the windows, there is only you and the books, and the steady rhythm of water falling from the sky. The rain is always present here, as though the bookshop breathes with it, a part of the storm, yet sheltered from it. If you reach out to take a book from the shelf, you will find that the pages are dry, crisp beneath your fingers. Despite the dampness that clings to the world outside, each book holds a story you have never heard before, but feels strangely familiar. Tales of distant lands, forgotten cities, conversations between people who might have been you in another time, another life. Some books are written in languages you do not recognize, but somehow still understand. Others have no words at all, just images, drawings of stars, maps of places that do not exist on any known atlas. If you sit in one of the worn leather chairs by the window, the hours slip past unnoticed. The rain continues, a gentle percussion against the glass, as you lose yourself in story after story. Sometimes you might hear footsteps on the floor above, but when you look up the staircase, you will see only shadows and the outline of more bookshelves, spiraling into the dark. The bookshop seems infinite, stretching beyond the walls of the alley, into a space that feels both intimate and boundless. Time behaves differently here. The rain might last minutes, or hours, or days, but inside the bookshop, it is always the same, a perpetual afternoon, softly lit, with the scent of rain-soaked earth lingering just outside the door. And when the rain finally stops, when the clouds part and the sun warms the stones of the alley, the glow from the shop fades. If you are still inside, you will feel it, a gentle urging to place the book back on the shelf, to rise from the chair, to walk back through the door. Stepping outside, you will find the alley empty again, silent and ordinary. No sign of the bookshop, no trace that it was ever there, only the lingering sensation of stories still unfolding within you. Echoes of pages you can no longer hold but will never forget. Some say the bookshop has always existed, appearing only to those who need it most, on days when the rain feels heavier than usual, when the weight of the world presses in just a little too closely. Others believe it is the creation of someone's memory, a place conjured by longing, sustained by the collective hope that somewhere, hidden from the rush of everyday life, there is still a sanctuary for those who seek refuge in words. No one has ever found it twice. Those who have stumbled upon it tell their stories quietly, almost as though afraid that speaking of it too loudly might make it disappear forever. And yet, every time the rain falls steadily and the mist gathers in the alley, there is always the chance that the glow will return, that the door will open once more, and that someone, somewhere, will step inside, run their fingers along the spines of forgotten books, and, for a moment, feel entirely at home. Perhaps, one day, you will find it again. Or perhaps it is meant to be a singular encounter, one perfect afternoon, preserved in memory like a pressed flower between the pages of a beloved book. Either way, the next time it rains, you might find yourself turning down that alley without knowing why, pausing just long enough to see if the glow is there. And if it is, you'll know that you have been chosen once again by the bookshop that only appears in rain. The bell tower that rings itself. On the edge of an old village, where the cobblestone streets give way to fields of tall grass, there stands a bell tower. Its stones are worn smooth by centuries of rain and wind, and ivy climbs steadily up its walls, as though trying to pull it back to the earth. No one remembers who built it. The villagers say it has always been there, looming over the rooftops, silent except for one sound. The bell rings on its own. There are no ropes, no clappers, no hands to set it in motion. Yet, at precise moments, the air will fill with its low, resonant tone, a sound that seems to emerge from the stone itself, vibrating through the ground, passing through walls and windows until it reaches every corner of the village. The first time you hear it, you might not even realize what it is. It sounds less like metal striking metal, and more like time itself announcing its presence. Some say the bell rings to mark the hour, but no clock in the village matches its schedule. Sometimes it rings at dawn, sometimes in the middle of the night, or just as the fog begins to drift in from the hills. Others believe it tolls for different reasons, to signal when someone is about to arrive, or when someone has quietly departed. If you ask the oldest residents, they will tell you stories about hearing the bell at the most unexpected moments, when a child took their first breath, when an old friend returned after many years, when someone passed away with only the moon as witness dot, and always, the bell rang alone, no footsteps climbing the narrow, spiraling staircase, no figure in the tower's shadows, just the sound, clear and deep, echoing across the village like a memory too persistent to fade. Some nights, when the air is still and the stars are hidden behind a veil of clouds, you can walk toward the tower and hear the bell before you see it. It resonates through the mist, drawing you closer, guiding your steps along the worn path that leads to its base. The entrance is sealed now, an ancient wooden door bound by rusted iron. No one has entered the tower for as long as anyone can remember, yet the bell continues to sing. If you stand there long enough, tilting your head to listen, you might notice that the sound is not just one note, but many, layered and delicate, woven together like threads of a forgotten melody. Some say it is the voice of the tower itself, a living thing that cannot be silenced. Others whisper that the bell is rung by the ghosts of those who built it, or by timekeepers from another era, still fulfilling their duty long after the village has ceased to notice. But most have accepted the bell as part of the village's life, like the turning of the seasons or the bloom of wildflowers along the riverbank. It rings, and they listen, and then return to whatever quiet task the day requires. There was once a clockmaker who tried to explain it, measuring the air, the vibrations, the structure of the tower itself, but every calculation led to the same conclusion. The bell should not be able to ring, and yet it did. So the clockmaker put away his tools and joined the others in simply listening. Sometimes, on a morning thick with fog, the bell will ring 3 times, slow and deliberate. Other days, it might release a single tone, as if to remind the village of its presence, before falling silent once more. No one knows when the bell will ring again. It does not follow the sun or the calendar or any rule known to those who dwell beneath it, and perhaps that is why it continues to captivate all who hear it, a sound untethered from reason, existing only because it must. If you leave the village and return years later, you will still find the tower standing, unchanged, its stones weathered but steady, and if you pause, just for a moment, you may hear it again, that low, familiar tone drifting through the air, carrying with it all the stories and silences the village has known. Some say that in the final days of the village, when the last lights go out and the last footsteps fade from its streets, the bell will toll one last time, a farewell, a promise, an echo that will linger long after the tower itself has been claimed by ivy and earth. But until that day, it will remain, ringing, calling, reminding all who hear it that some things need know. Hands to keep time, only the quiet persistence of presence and the space to be heard.